Respect does not come from kindness, visible effort, or displayed competence. These are decorative virtues, useful only when power is already established. In the real world, they function as silent requests for acceptance, and requests never generate respect. Respect arises from the cold reading people make of your presence, posture, response time, silence, emotional control. The world measures this before hearing a single word. Those who try to prove their value have already placed themselves lower in the invisible hierarchy. Modern morality teaches that being correct protects you. In practice, it exposes you. Intention doesn't matter. What matters is the perception that you cannot be crossed, hurried, or used. Respect is the consequence of restraint. Those who understand this do not raise their voice, do not explain themselves, do not compete for attention. They claim space. They fill the environment with calm. The rest happens without announcement. The social system doesn't punish malice. It punishes predictability. Good people tend to be stable, accessible, and consistent. These traits, when not paired with power, become open maps, and anything too easy to read ends up being exploited. Excessive correctness signals the absence of threat. The man who is always available, always fair, always understandable, teaches others to step 1 inch beyond the limit, not out of cruelty, but instinct. Where there is no cost, there is intrusion. Being righteous without strength isn't perceived as virtue, it's interpreted as weakness. The social environment doesn't evaluate character, it evaluates risk. And someone who never reacts, never withholds, and never imposes consequences is treated as neutral territory. This is why disrespect is rarely personal. It's structural. It appears the moment someone realizes they can interrupt, demand, delay, provoke, or disregard you without paying a price. Hierarchy adjusts itself without meetings or agreements. The good man believes he will be recognized with time. The system believes he will always be available. That difference in interpretation creates the gap. While he waits for fairness, the world tests boundaries. In professional settings, this appears as silent overload. In personal relationships, as invasive intimacy. In social circles, as jokes disguised as affection. The pattern repeats because the message is the same. Unrestricted access. Goodness is not the problem. Lack of containment is. Without friction, there is no respect. Without implicit risk, there is no hierarchy. The system doesn't hate good men. It simply uses them until they become invisible. When this isn't understood, the man enters internal conflict. He feels anger, but suppresses it. He feels contempt, but hides it. This division weakens him further because now he fights the world and himself. Respect begins where predictability ends. Not through aggression, but through silent boundaries. Where there was once free access, distance appears, and the system understands immediately. There is a silent law that shapes any environment where human beings compete for space. It isn't written, it isn't taught, and it is rarely acknowledged. Yet it defines a man's social value with ruthless precision. The more he explains, the less he is worth. This principle works because explanation exposes need. Anyone who must justify intentions, behaviors, or choices is signaling dependence on someone else's approval to exist. In real hierarchies, respect comes from what you withhold, not from what you offer. Every piece of information you give, every motive you reveal, every emotion you spell out reduces the psychological distance that sustains power. Mystery is not decoration, it is structure. It prevents others from mapping your weaknesses, predicting your reactions, or calculating your limits. What cannot be predicted cannot be controlled. This knowledge operates everywhere, at work, in intimate relationships, in social groups. The man who speaks little, observes deeply, and responds slowly creates a tension that reshapes the environment around him. People adjust their behavior because they don't know what he tolerates, how far he goes, or what he truly thinks. That uncertainty generates automatic respect, born not from fear, but from caution. The common mistake is believing that transparency builds trust. In reality, it builds exposure. True trust emerges when others sense that you have boundaries and will not negotiate them. That only exists when there is silence, restraint, and deliberate pause. The invisible rule demands that you protect your internal territory. Those who give it away freely lose relevance without even noticing. The feeling of a forbidden truth comes from the fact that almost no one admits this. Society teaches people to open up, explain themselves, and display everything. Hierarchies, however, reward those who remain opaque. The world respects the one who does not reveal himself. A man who masters this rule doesn't need to assert authority. He becomes the reference point everyone measures before acting. The need to be understood destroys a man's authority before he even notices it happening. Explaining intentions, justifying actions, or exposing emotions operates as an act of surrender. It is the implicit admission that another person's perception weighs more than his own awareness. Explanation is always an act of submission. You place yourself beneath someone else so they can validate your existence. When someone rushes to reveal their motives, they also expose the fear of being misinterpreted. That fear signals fragility, and fragility, in any social environment, immediately reorganizes the hierarchy against the one who displays it. The content of the explanation doesn't matter. What matters is the psychological movement it exposes. Dependence. In power dynamics, the one who preserves silence holds the advantage. The absence of explanation creates opacity. Opacity creates doubt, and doubt prevents intrusion. When you detail everything you feel, think, or want, you hand the other person a complete map of your emotional structure. From that moment on, anyone with a dominant instinct knows exactly where to press. The compulsive need to be understood comes from discomfort with one's own silence. Men who cannot tolerate that empty space try to fill it with words. They believe transparency creates peace. In reality, it creates exposure. True peace comes from containment, from internal mastery that requires no validation. The man who needs to be understood reveals that he does not yet understand himself. Social dynamics are unforgiving. The one who explains too much becomes predictable. The one who becomes predictable loses weight. The one who loses weight stops being taken seriously. The fatal mistake is believing that emotional clarity brings people closer. What actually brings them closer is respect, and respect requires distance. Understanding is secondary, power is not. The man who seeks to be understood accepts an inferior position. The man who tolerates silence takes silent command of the situation. It is in that space between what you guard and what the world demands that respect begins to form, unequal, unavoidable, and implacable. Total transparency turns any man into a flat surface. Easy to read, easy to predict, easy to cross. When everyone knows exactly how you think, react, and feel, your presence loses weight. Predictability removes the social tension that sustains respect. The other person no longer needs to measure their words or adjust their behavior, because they've already mapped your boundaries before ever testing them. The absence of mystery dismantles your silent authority. Constant access to your emotional state creates a landscape where you are managed, not regarded. This dynamic isn't born from malice but from instinct. Human beings navigate what they do not fully understand. What is completely understood becomes disposable. Transparency, when not reinforced by strength, invites subtle exploitation. Strategic opacity is not manipulation, it is protection. It is the recognition that your inner world cannot be accessible to just anyone. When you control what you reveal, you redefine how others approach you. Psychological distance prevents them from invading your space, diminishing your importance, or treating your presence as guaranteed. This reserve doesn't require effort, only discipline. An opaque man doesn't need to raise his voice to be respected. His lack of reactivity creates a zone of uncertainty that forces the environment to reorganize itself around him. At work, people notice he doesn't waver. In personal relationships, they understand he is not easily decoded. In social groups, they sense that his attention is rare. This combination produces an invisible force that no one tests lightly. The shift from transparency to control begins the moment you stop narrating your life to the world. What was once offered as a sign of closeness becomes calculated silence. From that point forward, respect stops being a request and becomes a consequence. Because the man who refuses to give himself entirely becomes inevitable, and the inevitable are never treated like the rest. They are treated with caution. Machiavelli understood that power is not affirmed through words, but through the ability to remain unmoved while the other person reveals himself. Silence is not the absence of a voice. It is a weapon that forces the environment to show its intentions. The one who speaks tries to persuade. The one who stays silent forces the other to adjust. This is why in human disputes, speech rarely wins. It explains too much, exposes too much, and begs too much. Silence creates a space in which the other person reveals himself out of necessity. He tries to read your face, your posture, your reaction time, and in that effort, he exposes his weaknesses, anxieties, and desires. Meanwhile, you observe, without haste, without justification, without internal pressure. Control changes hands not when you speak, but when you refuse the impulse to respond quickly. In negotiations, silence prolongs tension. The opponent shows his limits before you even lift a finger. In personal relationships, silence interrupts subtle manipulation because the person seeking control depends on your immediate reaction. When you don't respond, they lose the script. In social settings, silence reorganizes the group. Everyone starts measuring their words around someone who does not offer himself easily. Machiavelli knew that silence creates a specific form of hierarchy, one in which power is not announced, it is assumed. The absence of explanation triggers speculation, and speculation produces respect. A man who masters silence does not need to intimidate. The uncertainty he generates does the work for him. Every pause, every neutral look, every delayed response sends the same message. I'm not here to compete for territory. I am the territory. In the game of power, words are expenses. Silence is an investment. It preserves energy, maintains mystery, and protects your inner structure. It is the tool that separates those who try to be heard from those who are already noticed. A man who commands silence does not win arguments. He wins the mind of the one who argues. Respect doesn't belong to the strongest, but to the least affected. The one who reacts gives up his position because he reveals that the other has emotional access. The moment you respond with irritation, justification, or defense, you admit you were touched. And anyone who can be touched can be manipulated. Hierarchy shifts without violence. It shifts through the exposure of your sensitivity. Cold calm is not a spiritual virtue, it is strategy. It prevents your movements from being read, anticipates weaknesses in the other's posture, and places the environment in a silent tension that always favors you. When you don't react, the other tries to decipher your silence. In that process, he reveals more than he intended: intentions, insecurities, hidden agendas. Your stillness forces the opponent to move first, and whoever moves first gives up territory. In everyday life, this appears subtly. The colleague who tries to provoke you realizes the provocation has no effect and steps back. The person who relies on emotional manipulation loses control because your silence doesn't validate their theatrics. The adversary, expecting confrontation, finds only containment, and that absence of energy dismantles his urge to attack. Coldness reorganizes the game without a raised voice. Respect is not earned through reaction, but through restraint. Showing your irritation gives the other a tool. Showing your calm proves they have no access to your center. And when a man becomes emotionally inaccessible, everything around him adjusts to avoid colliding with what cannot be moved. The game of respect is a game of position. It isn't won by the one who speaks the loudest, but by the one who remains unchanged. It isn't won by the one who tries to impose himself, but by the one who has no need to react. When you withhold instead of respond, observe instead of compete, control instead of explode, something settles in the environment. The sense that you are not just another participant, you are the axis around which everyone else moves. Being feared, respected, or ignored are not emotional states. They are positions within the human hierarchy. The feared man creates tension because he projects immediate consequence, but fear generates resistance. Those who fear you look for chances to neutralize your presence, even quietly. Fear sustains short-term dominance. It fuels conspiracies, not loyalty. Any strength that must be displayed already reveals its own fragility. The ignored man occupies the opposite extreme. He represents no risk, alters nothing around him, and provokes no internal adjustment in others. He is socially transparent. His presence carries no weight, his silence creates no uncertainty, and his words change nothing. To be ignored is the deepest form of disrespect because it shows that you do not influence the psychological field around you. It is like being physically present yet energetically absent. Between these two extremes lies the territory of respect, and that territory is quiet. Respect is not born from intimidation or charm. Fear creates strategic distance. Sympathy creates comfort and eventually contempt. Respect emerges when your presence implies consequences, even if you never state them. It is built on the perception that you are not easily accessed, not emotionally predictable, and not socially manipulable. Respect is invisible discipline. Others speak with more caution, observe before acting, and limit provocations on their own, not out of fear of punishment but because they perceive structure. What you do not reveal carries more weight than what you say. What you do not react to communicates more than any display of strength. Respect is the psychological effect of a boundary no one is willing to cross without calculating the cost. To be feared requires effort. To be ignored requires weakness. To be respected requires consistency. When the environment understands that your posture does not shift with provocations, praise, or manipulation attempts, you become a fixed point in unstable territory. And fixed points are rare. That is why they are respected. It is the absence of instability, not the excess of force, that defines the man whose presence alters the behavior of everyone around him. A man who seeks respect reacts to the environment. A man who receives it shapes the environment. This difference comes from a silent code built through minimal gestures and internal choices that change how others read you. It's not a set of techniques. It's a psychological discipline that reshapes your presence. The first pillar is simple: do not explain. Every justification is a concession. Every disclosure is a retreat. When you hold back, your words gain weight. When you give everything away, your voice loses density. The absence of explanation creates an invisible boundary that blocks subtle invasions. The second pillar is not reacting. Reaction exposes vulnerability. Anyone who controls your emotions controls you. The untouchable man observes without haste, analyzes without noise, and decides without transparency. This posture dismantles attacks that depend on your response to exist. In work environments, it turns pressure against the one who applies it. In personal relationships, it becomes automatic respect. In social groups, it establishes natural hierarchy. Coldness is not the absence of emotion. It is mastery over an internal territory no one else can reach. The third pillar is not seeking validation. The need to be seen, recognized, or accepted destroys your structure of power. Validation is a cheap currency, handed out to those who display themselves too much. The man who doesn't seek it reshapes the environment, because his energy doesn't depend on external approval. He doesn't compete for attention, doesn't fight for a stage, doesn't try to prove anything. This psychological independence creates an uncomfortable clarity. Others realize they have no real impact on him. The fourth pillar is not competing for attention. Those who compete lose. Those who occupy rule. The presence of the untouchable man doesn't impose itself through volume but through precision. His movements are rare, his words measured, his expression unreadable. Attention comes to him because his absence is as significant as his presence. This contrast generates authority without visible effort. Together, these pillars form a code that turns behavior into aura. The untouchable man doesn't threaten. He sets limits. He doesn't hide. He remains inaccessible. He doesn't showcase himself. He becomes unavoidable. And the unavoidable do not ask for respect, they receive it before they speak. The world does not grant respect to those who mean well. It grants it to those who are unavoidable. The difference between these two states is built through silence, restraint, and the distance you maintain from the gaze of others. Anyone who ignores this structure spends a lifetime trying to prove their worth, fighting for space that should never have been negotiated. Invisibility does not come from lack of potential, but from excess exposure. The more you reveal yourself, the less weight you carry. Modernity taught men to be understandable, accessible, and transparent. But the social environment operates by a different logic. It responds to what is rare, not to what is offered freely. A presence that imposes no consequence disappears within the collective noise. The absence of boundaries turns any man into public ground, and public ground is never respected. Respect is not requested, it is assumed. It appears when your posture makes it clear that your attention is limited, your peace is non-negotiable, and your reactions cannot be purchased by external stimuli. A man who controls these three forces has nothing to defend. His mere existence changes the way the world approaches him. Restraint becomes authority. Coldness becomes structure. Distance becomes hierarchy. Ignoring these laws means accepting the silent sentence of irrelevance. It means clinging to the belief that good intentions are enough to shape the world. They are not. The world responds to what resists, not to what pleads. It responds to what observes, not to what justifies itself. It responds to what remains firm, not to what seeks to be understood. The truth is simple and unforgiving. A man who fails to impose presence is erased. A man who does not control his own inner territory is shaped by the environment. A man who does not understand respect never receives it. And in the end, only one sentence remains. In the game of power, the man who is too visible has already lost. The man who is inevitable will never be ignored.